How to talk so your child actually listens. There is a difficult possibility most people never consider. Sometimes, the reason a child stops listening is not rebellion, it is emotional exhaustion. Not exhaustion from noise, not exhaustion from rules, but exhaustion from constantly translating the emotional weather of the adults around them. A child can learn to obey words while completely disconnecting from meaning. And many adults never notice the moment it happens. Because from the outside, the child still responds, still nods, and still says okay. But internally, the bridge has already collapsed. What many people call discipline problems are often relationship fractures hidden beneath routine. And the frightening part is this. You can love a child deeply and still speak to them in ways that slowly teach fear instead of understanding. This video is not about becoming a perfect parent. It is about learning how language shapes identity. Because every conversation with a child quietly answers a question they are too young to ask directly. Am I safe with you when I fail? And the answer to that question follows them for the rest of their life. So if children are not simply refusing authority, what are they actually responding to? To understand why listening disappears, we first have to understand what happens inside the mind when communication stops feeling emotionally safe. Because before a child stops responding outwardly, something internally has already begun. Next, we explore why children stop listening in the first place. Why children stop listening. Most communication problems are not information problems. They are nervous system problems. Adults often assume children refuse to listen because they do not understand. But many children understand perfectly. They simply cannot emotionally process what is being delivered. Think about how many instructions a child hears in a single day. Stop that, not now, hurry up, why would you do that, you never listen. And so the soul is slowly shaped by commands, cautions, corrections, and invisible expectations. A childhood stitched together from interruptions and instructions. Rules spoken so often they stop sounding like words and start becoming identity. Before we ever learn who we are, we learn restraint, we learn urgency, we learn performance, and we learn how to silence parts of ourselves just to belong. And somewhere beneath the endless chorus of commands, the quiet voice of the self waits patiently to be heard. Even gentle homes can accidentally become emotionally overcrowded. And over time, the child's mind adapts. Not through defiance but through filtering. The human mind was not designed to stay emotionally open under constant correction. Eventually, it protects itself. This is why some children appear distracted, resistant, or emotionally distant. Not because they are broken, but because repeated emotional pressure teaches the brain to survive rather than connect. Ancient wisdom traditions understood something modern culture often forgets. A human being cannot be transformed through humiliation, only guidance. The prophets and sages who shaped civilizations did not force hearts open. They invited hearts toward truth. There is a difference. One creates fear and the other creates trust. And trust is the invisible architecture behind listening. Without trust, words become noise. But communication is not only shaped by what is said. Often, the deeper message travels underneath the words themselves. And children hear that hidden message more clearly than most adults realize. Which brings us into the hidden psychology of tone, the emotional layer beneath language that children remember long after words fade. The hidden psychology of tone. Children do not only hear language, they absorb emotional texture. Tone enters deeper than vocabulary. A child may forget the exact sentence, but the nervous system remembers the atmosphere. This is why two people can say the exact same words and create completely different outcomes. Clean your room can feel like guidance or rejection. Come here can feel like safety or danger. Many adults unknowingly speak to children from accumulated stress rather than present awareness. Not because they are cruel, but because modern life fragments attention. People are overstimulated, sleep-deprived, financially anxious, and emotionally unresolved. Constantly consuming outrage disguised as entertainment. And children absorb what adults fail to process. A child becomes the emotional mirror of the environment. This is why emotional regulation matters more than verbal perfection. You do not need flawless parenting scripts. What you need is emotional congruence. When your words and emotional state contradict each other, children trust the emotional signal always. If calm words are delivered with concealed anger, the child hears anger. If encouragement is delivered with disappointment hidden beneath it, the child hears disappointment. Children are not less perceptive than adults; in many ways, they are more perceptive. They simply lack the language to explain what they feel. And this changes everything. Because communication is no longer just about controlling behavior. It becomes the transmission of emotional reality. And when emotional tension becomes a child's daily atmosphere, something even more dangerous can begin to form. Not just distance, but shame. And once shame enters communication, it begins quietly silencing the soul itself. Why shame silences the soul? There is a form of speech that appears effective in the short term: shame. It can create immediate compliance, immediate silence, and immediate obedience. But internally, something dangerous begins forming. The child stops asking "What did I do wrong?" and begins asking "What is wrong with me?" That shift changes the architecture of identity. A mistake becomes a self-concept. This is why public humiliation, constant criticism, comparison, sarcasm, and labeling can leave scars long after childhood ends. Words become internal narrators. And eventually, the adult voice disappears, but the inner voice remains. Many adults still speak to themselves using the emotional vocabulary they received as children. Not because they consciously chose it, because repeated language becomes internal law. Ancient scripture repeatedly returns to this idea in different forms. The tongue carries the power to wound or restore. Speech can either awaken the spirit or crush it. And children especially believe the voices closest to them. This is why one of the most powerful phrases a child can hear is not "You're perfect, but you are still loved while learning." That sentence creates psychological safety. And safety is what allows accountability to work without destroying dignity. Because children who feel emotionally safe are far more likely to tell the truth, far more likely to listen, and far more likely to self-correct. Fear controls behavior temporarily, connection transforms behavior gradually. One produces performance, the other produces character. So if shame closes the human spirit, what actually opens it? The answer may be simpler than most people think. People listen more deeply when they feel understood beneath their behavior. Which is why the next step is learning how to speak to the person beneath the behavior itself. Speak to the person beneath the behavior. Every behavior is trying to solve something, even unhealthy behavior. Anger may be protecting embarrassment. Defiance may be protecting helplessness. Withdrawal may be protecting fear. Children rarely possess the emotional vocabulary to explain these inner states clearly. So the emotion leaks through behavior instead. And many adults respond only to the surface. But behavior is often the smoke, not the fire. Imagine a child slamming a door. One response says "Fix your attitude," and another response says "You seem overwhelmed. Talk to me." The second response does not remove accountability, it removes emotional isolation. This distinction matters. Listening begins when a child feels seen beneath the behavior. Not excused, seen. There is a profound difference. A child who feels unseen eventually stops revealing themselves. And when children stop revealing themselves, adults lose influence while believing they still have authority. This is why curiosity is more powerful than interrogation. Instead of "Why are you acting like this?" try, "What happened before you started feeling this way?" Instead of "What is wrong with you?" try, "What are you needing right now?" Language can either corner the nervous system or open it. And when a child feels emotionally cornered, the brain shifts into defense. No real listening happens there, only survival. But understanding another human being requires something modern life constantly interrupts: slowness, presence, and attention. And without those things, even loving communication can begin to feel emotionally empty. Because sometimes the greatest power in communication is not intensity, but slowness. The power of slowness. Modern communication is fast, reactive, and fragmented. But meaningful communication with children often requires slowness. Not laziness, presence. Children live in emotional time, not productivity time. Adults often speak while distracted. While scrolling, while rushing, and while mentally somewhere else. And children feel this absence immediately. To a child, attention is a form of love. This is why even 5 fully present minutes can shape a relationship more deeply than hours of distracted proximity. Some of the most transformative conversations happen during ordinary moments. Driving home, washing dishes, walking quietly, or sitting beside them after a difficult day. Children often speak most honestly when they do not feel emotionally cornered. And this requires patience. There is a reason wisdom traditions describe patience as strength rather than weakness. Because patience allows reality to unfold without forcing it. A tree does not grow faster because someone pulls on the branches. And children do not become emotionally mature through pressure alone. They grow through guidance, repetition, example, boundaries, and consistent emotional safety. Not perfection, consistency. Of course, no human being communicates perfectly. Every relationship eventually experiences misunderstanding, frustration, and rupture. But what shapes a child most deeply is not the absence of mistakes, it is what happens after the mistake. Because children are always learning something profound from how adults repair what was broken. What children learn from how you repair. Perhaps the most important truth is this: you will speak imperfectly sometimes. Every human being does. You will become frustrated, you will misunderstand, and you will say things you wish you could take back. But children do not need flawless adults, they need adults who know how to repair. A sincere apology from an adult can heal more than endless performances of authority. Because repair teaches something sacred. Love does not disappear when mistakes happen. Many people were raised in environments where power mattered more than humility, where adults never admitted fault, and where emotional distance was mistaken for strength. But genuine strength is not domination, it is the ability to remain grounded enough to reconnect after rupture. When an adult says, "I spoke harshly earlier. I'm sorry," the child learns accountability without shame. The child learns that being human does not make someone unworthy of love. And perhaps most importantly, the child learns how to apologize someday without collapsing into self-hatred. Children become what they repeatedly witness, not what they repeatedly hear. And perhaps this is where the conversation becomes personal. Because before changing how children listen, it may be necessary to examine how we speak, react, withdraw, and repair. Not with guilt, with honesty. So before ending, there is one final step. A quiet self-diagnostic reflection about the emotional atmosphere our words create. Before asking whether a child listens to you, ask these questions quietly. When a child speaks, do you listen to understand or listen to correct? Does your tone create openness or emotional caution? When conflict happens, does the child feel safe telling the truth? Do your words focus more on behavior or identity? Do you speak from presence or accumulated stress? Can the child disappoint you without fearing emotional withdrawal? When you apologize, does it come with defensiveness or sincerity? Do your conversations create fear of failure or courage to grow? And perhaps the deepest question: does the child feel loved only when functioning well, or also when struggling? The answer to these questions shapes more than communication. It shapes the inner voice the child may carry for decades. In the end, communication is never just about getting someone to obey. It is about teaching another human being what relationships feel like. Every home becomes a kind of emotional classroom. Some teach performance, some teach fear, some teach silence, and some quietly teach something far more rare. That truth can exist alongside compassion. That accountability can exist alongside dignity. And that love does not disappear when imperfection enters the room. Long after childhood ends, people often forget specific rules, but they remember emotional atmosphere. They remember who made them feel small and who made them feel safe enough to become honest. Perhaps this is why sacred wisdom across centuries repeatedly points humanity toward gentleness, patience, mercy, and restraint. Not because human beings are fragile, but because the soul opens slowly. Especially in a loud world. So if a child is no longer listening, perhaps the first question is not how do I control them, but what does our communication teach them about being human? And maybe that question changes everything. If this video spoke to something real inside you, share your thoughts in the comments. What is one sentence from childhood you never forgot? And what is one sentence you wish every child could hear more often?